Hello, everyone, and welcome to our free Academy Live session. What are we covering today, Kirsten?
All things gut health in the athlete.
Awesome. My name's Alicia. I'm an advanced sports dietitian and co-founder of Compeat Performance. Oh, good, that took a while. And it's Kirsten.
Compeat Academy Coordinator.
Yeah, she is. And legend. And very good baker of sourdough. All good things. What a resume.
It's growing.
We're today going to talk around all things gut, and we appreciate that gut health is a really big, broad topic with lots of different niches within it. Kirsten's coming from a background of incredible clinical knowledge in this space, and then I kind of just bring the athlete side on the side.
I forgot to mention that I'm a dietitian and sports dietitian.
I was really wondering when you were going to say it, because I was like, but I didn't say it, but you've just gone in and done a really half-assed job of introducing yourself. So she's actually qualified. Not just talking from personal experience. No. So we're going to cover a whole lot of stuff as much as possible in this half-hour session, but also appreciating that there's a lot of learning additional to this that we will add where you can find that and what kind of things to consider as well. It'll be practical, as we always are, of like how to translate this into your practice and considerations. But also we'll cover a little bit of the exercise-induced stuff alongside fibre, FODMAPs, and appreciate that this is probably going to go over half hour when I'm listing all these things because we can't prioritise well.
There's just so much to talk about.
Too busy brains. So the foundations, let's go through it, I guess. When we're presented with someone who is challenged with gut symptoms, it can be really tempting to go in with the fixed solution. I remember learning this in uni, or I know that if I eliminate this, it might help. And you kind of jump in and blurt out all these options or eliminations that may not actually be the problem, or they could just be a band-aid to the problem and the root cause. So I think when we're considering the whole foundation, it's really going person first and taking some time to listen, really get an idea of, sorry, there's a whole lot of drama outside around our dog who really wants to be in here. And just not jumping to that fix, taking some time to really understand what kind of history there is, what kind of symptoms are there, and also what they've been tried or tested or been tested for previously as well. So you get that full picture, because gut health is very complex in how it presents, but also all the different things that you need to consider along the way. And I guess the other thing here is, yes, we're dietitians, but gut symptoms may not be about the food. So it's taking some time to appreciate what's going to be impacting the gut health and the symptoms associated with that is really, really important. So things to think about, which most people will be aware on this call, is like the impact of stress and anxiety, nerves, all those types of things on the gut and the symptoms associated with it. Making sure that we're taking time to appreciate where someone is at in their mental health or the symptoms they're are feeling on day-to-day, but also on race day or competition. We also need to consider the impact of not eating enough or low energy availability, and as a part of that, the down-regulation on gut health and gut motility, and how that can impact symptoms. If they are experiencing disordered eating or eating disorder. And alongside that, just doing a little, I guess, consideration in fibre. So too much versus not enough, impact of like all those complexities where there might be some overlap in, say, disordered eating, eating disorder, obsession with health, big loads of intake due to high exertion and training load can also lead to having too much fibre rather than not enough. And also taking some time in like thinking about the timing of meals, the type of meals, the pace that they're eating those things, what kind of foods they're choosing, like doing a full history in many ways to break down what's going to happen. But what you're going to go through is like that importance of ruling out the other things first before jumping in with eliminations or changes.
Yeah. So I think one of the best places to start when it comes from a gut health perspective is, as you mentioned, ruling out if there's other sinister causes, which I'm sure that everyone's really well across, but we wouldn't want to be diving into changing the diet if there's actually some underlying pathologies, IBD, IBS, celiac disease, etc. So making sure that people have been tested for that before we go into modifying the diet is really important. Also looking at the types of fibres and how that might be impacting the person as well. So keeping in mind if there is underfueling or potentially some disordered eating disorder happening, screening for that first before we go diving into any dietary modification or supplements as well. Very important. And then we're looking at like when the gut symptoms are happening, the frequency, the timing, if the person's looked into that before and what they've tried before as well. And then we'd be looking into the dietary side of things if we've ruled out all of those potential other causes. Be looking at, from a gut health perspective, looking at we're thinking about what the role of fibre is in general well-being, but then also we have to consider the performance element. So it is quite a balancing act to working out that balance, like I've just said. So what we want to be doing is still prioritising performance when it needs to be forefront. And we're also sometimes we might be needing to dial back the fibre in some circumstances. And so coming in with a strategy around how we might manage that. So having some usual foods to go for, and then focusing on times when performance maybe isn't the focus. In recovery, for example, when we're looking at bringing more colour, more fibre for that recovery piece as well. Some of the strategies, I suppose, I won't dive into it too much because I'm conscious of time, but we might be looking at modified FODMAP for some clients. And when I say modified, I don't mean a complete low FODMAP diet. In practice, I've found that modified FODMAP tends to be a lot less restrictive, and you can focus on the symptomology that the person is presenting with, and focusing on key foods that they might be having that could be impacting, versus it's kind of like that bottom up or top down approach where we're looking at specific,
literally both.
Looking at reducing and swapping some of those higher FODMAP foods that correlate with those symptoms that we're seeing in the client. So for example, if the person's experiencing diarrhea more commonly, we might be looking at managing their lactose content or their fructose if that's something that you notice is quite high in their diet. I'm speaking really fast because there's so much to cover.
And I think that's the thing, right? We're never going to cover it all in today's, but we do have a full module on this for the reason that it is so complex and it does come up so frequently, particularly in sports practice. So if you have access to all the modules in our Academy membership, then please head over there and devour it. If you don't and you're interested in like kind of navigating this space plus others, we do have the modules in the Pro membership that I think we've got over 30 now. It's wild, but it's added up very quickly. But this is one of those for the main reason that it is so complex. We get experts in to actually chat about it and go through this in more detail of what that looks like in practice. So and I think the other piece to that, Kirsten, what we'll cover in a sec is the supplement side.
Yeah. So then if we're looking through the diet, they've tried a few things and there hasn't been those results that you'd be expecting with the modified fibre diet, then we're looking at some potential things to trial with athletes, and we'll talk a bit more about the considerations around the supplement side of things a bit later.
Yeah, perfect. Because that's something I've learned so much from you on, which is really, really fun. And I guess when you're looking at gut symptoms, it'd be amiss of us not to cover the exercise-induced stuff, because it is something that I think is really relevant to the athlete population, something that I think a lot of dietitians do get stuck on. It's a big part of our supervision, individual sessions and also group conversations for that reason. So exercise-induced is really around the complexity of the symptoms that can occur as a result of exercise and its impact on the gut. So when this happens, there's lots of different things at play, and it can be related to like a change in the nervous activity, but also gut hormone levels will change. And I've got a list so I don't forget any of this. The blood flow side, so the prioritization of blood flow to the skin or to the working limbs and the cost of that to the gut. But also changes in nutrient and electrolyte absorption and the intestinal permeability. So there's lots of complexities behind this. There's some incredible papers by Monash-led researchers that I highly recommend devouring. However, I also find that it's really complex and the language is really complex, and it does take me a lot of time to digest. the material. So I appreciate how complex this is in the niche of practice. And so translating that to then your client is even harder at times.
I find, sorry, I just feel like it's
no.
really important to mention in that space. Language I found is absolutely key when we're working with clients, regardless of how they've screened from an eating disorder risk perspective, which is key before you delve into any of these things. I still find when I'm working with people, even if I have flagged them as low risk, I'm still really intentional and careful with how I'm talking to people about the swaps that we're making and educating around why we're doing what we're doing. And really gradual stepwise approach so that we can see what's working and not working, but also so that they feel empowered and can actually drive what you're doing.
Yeah. And that why and purpose, I think, needs to always come at the core. Sometimes you'll feel like you're over communicating, but I really don't think that's possible when we're coming in with some assumed knowledge, and we can easily confuse or I think unintentionally cause disorder and anxiety around food decision, particularly once we're eliminating.
And I also find too, working with people, like you could be working together for 6-12 months on something, and then you'll have this light bulb moment with people where they've shared something. And because this is we've got to remember, this is a really sensitive topic as well. Someone might not feel comfortable day one telling you what's precisely happening in the gut. And then further down the track, they'll say something and you go, oh, I wish we'd known that before, but I'm really happy that you shared it now, and we can then pivot. So.
And I think like with all these things happening, it's not necessarily essential that you understand the really intricate piece of the mechanisms. I think that broad understanding is essential in actually then navigating the symptoms and the creating a solution alongside a collaborative team. However, don't panic if you don't know every single detail of every single hormone and process and things. Like, that is for the experts, and we've got them there to supervise and mentor and research for us. Your on the ground knowledge is still very, very valid, but you don't need to know all the details so innately that you're an expert in that niche. You can still absolutely help. And I think when we go through this, often what we're unpacking is obviously what they're having, before, during, after. We want to also appreciate things like hydration, electrolyte use, all those, the basic nutrition, caffeine, other supplements like, say, beetroot juice and those types of things that can create upset tummies. The other thing to consider is environment, so the uncontrollables, so things like heat, humidity, the course in like its complexity, its hill climbs, its intensity, the duration of the event or events. Are all things that we may not be able to control, but we can consider in the risk profile of how they're presenting and what we can control versus what we can't and we need to work around. But also thinking about that adequacy and trainability of the intake. So have they trained the gut? Have they practiced in training? Have they tried something new? Are they entering the race or the competition highly stressed, highly anxious? Lots of different things to consider. And so then you're like, well, if the cause seems to be that it is really only happening in hot, humid environments, or they're not acclimatized, or all these types of things, you can go, okay, well, let's work on acclimatization, or let's work on pre-cooling or per-cooling during. So you can start to then work through the solutions based around acknowledging what the high risk piece is for that person, rather than kind of just throwing an elimination at them. You're then going, actually, I don't know if it is the food. I think this is an environment piece we can't control, but there are some things we can do beforehand or during to ease that load on the gut. And it just helps you problem solve in a much more manageable way, but also practical way for the athlete in front of you.
Yep.
I don't think I missed any of the really big increased risks there. So I might hand over to you in terms of like just having a word on the fibre side of things, but also supplements.
Yeah. So from a fibre perspective, as we've said with all of it, very complex, but I think doing a great assessment of how much fibre they're having, the types and the subtypes of fibre that they're having.
Especially endurance athletes, like the load of food that they're having to have to get the energy intake they need to have high energy availability just means they're naturally having quite a lot of fibre a lot of the time, just because they're eating.
We're talking like 50 grams plus a day, some athletes.
Do you know what? When I was doing Ironman, I had a new dietitian just practice on me to do a food diary. I was having 80 grams a day.
Wow.
And I was like, what would you recommend to me? And he's like, oh, do this. And I was like, can you also recommend I reduce my fibre? Like I didn't have massive issues, but it was definitely probably contributing to me not eating enough. Yeah.
And the interesting part of that too is people's individual tolerance of fibre. For you, 80 grams might not have felt like much, but for the next person, that could be so extreme in causing such excruciating bloating or wind pain, etc. So
absolutely.
The other thing I would be, which is probably common sense to most people, but I've just seen a protein bar wrapper and it's just prompted me to think about it, is be aware of like some potentially insidious options that might be contributing, such as protein fortified foods or energy bars, things like that. Sometimes they might have sugar alcohols or sweeteners in there that might be contributing to some gut symptoms as well. I personally know that there's something that I don't tolerate very well. So just thinking about those extra things that maybe someone might not think to tell you about, just to investigate that a little bit more. One of the first strategies I would try from a dietary perspective would be looking at the soluble fibre. And so managing that ratio of soluble versus insoluble, I'd be looking at whether we could increase soluble fibre proportion in the diet from food sources. So things like your chia seeds, oats, bananas, kiwi fruit, that kind of thing, and see if that's something that they seem to tolerate a little bit better than some of the more insoluble types of fibre. It tends to be a little bit more gentle on the gut, and that probably is a good segue into fibre supplements. I've had quite a big experience with fibre supplements personally and professionally. The go-to that a lot of people would trial first would be something like a psyllium husk or Benefiber or Metamucil. They all have their place, and I think it is they're usually quite cheap and easily accessible, lower risk in terms of doping, and that's probably something I should have mentioned a bit earlier, is really considering food first, and also from an athlete perspective, the risk versus benefit for them. You know, what level athlete are they? Are they recreational or are they pro? And where that doping is more of a risk.
Yeah, and how much is the symptom impacting their life, their performance as well?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Yeah.
And so before we are considering supplements or recommending it, I think it's really key to have those discussions with the athlete around risks versus benefits, including seeing if you can find a batch tested option.
It's just super blurry.
Yeah, and so many of the fibre supplements out there are not batch tested. So in those situations, looking at whether they are from a reputable source, what is the country of origin, contacting the supplier.
Where are they packaged, or what are they packaged with?
Yeah, so reaching out, I think, to the supplier is usually a pretty good first point of call if you are considering it. And so I've jumped around a little bit, but one of the most common supplements I've trialed with people is partially hydrolyzed guar gum. Alicia knows that this is like a big buzz.
It's a real passion area for her. Sourdough and PHGG are her two topics of conversation. Oh, and Poppy the Dalmatian.
Yeah. I've got my niches.
What kind of symptoms would you recommend trialing, like the PHGG, and what kind of things is it used for?
Interestingly, a little background on PHGG. It's been around for a little while now, but I think it's probably not the first fibre type that people tend to think of when they're thinking of adding a fibre supplement in. Tends to be a little bit more on the expensive side. There is an emerging and strong body of evidence around managing constipation and diarrhea, as well as IBS. So there's a few systematic reviews and meta-analysis around showing positive impacts in all of those spaces. But yeah, traditionally it's been a bit more expensive, not as easy to access. So I don't think it's usually people's first go-to. But the benefit with PHGG is it does have a high solubility, and it also doesn't form a gel in powder form. So you're mixing it up in water. It's a bit more easy to tolerate. It doesn't taste like anything.
Yeah.
I
have a really fussy athlete, like just terrible with engagement and just trying to get us to do stuff. I got to a point of like having to make her I was with her in the hotel and I could not get her. She was obviously quite like nervous about trying PHGG.
Fair.
And so I made her like almost like a real type video of like how to make it and how to take it and when, even though I was right with her. And I sent it to her and she's like, oh my God, just come up and give it to me. And I was like, oh, finally been pesty enough to get into like actually show her. Anyway, I hand her it and she's like, is that it? Because it actually just looks like water and the consistency is water as well. And there's no taste.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I was like,
from a tolerance and like ease of use, I'd say that it would be up there with one of the better products out there.
Yeah.
Not sponsored. I just see it as a really fantastic product with great evidence behind it
and easy compliance.
Yeah.
And even though you say it's more expensive, I feel like it's still quite achievable for most of our clients.
With every fibre supplement, I'm always really careful to recommend a gradual approach. So still starting with a smaller dosage than what you think they could probably tolerate and working through. And just looking for ways that they can add it in easily into their usual plan.
Really cool. And any other supplements that we would go through? Or
I think from a considerations perspective, it would be like what you mentioned before, really important to consider other potential supplements they're already taking that could be contributing to gut symptoms. So anything from creatine, your beta-alanine, nitrates.
Yeah, nitrates. Cherry juice as well.
Yeah.
Very high in
So considering whether they might, magnesium's another one that's quite a common one that athletes might take. So considering whether they might be potentially impacting on the gut would be worthwhile as well.
Yeah, and I think in that space there is very little research. Like it's kind of all hearsay or it may do this. And so if you're unsure about the research or you're like, oh, there's not much research to say that it does that, I would still really trust the athlete and their story and their experience because the research is quite lacking. And so if someone's experiencing something as a result of a supplement or it's a certain timing each day, I think unpacking that and bringing it up as something that might be very valid, even though there might be not strong evidence yet, is still really important. So I think in the sports space in particular, athletes tend to know things before research does. So I think listening to the athlete is really important, validating it, of course, and still being really evidence-based, but giving power and I guess time for their voice is a really important part in gut symptoms because often they've waited a really long time to either come forward or they've spent a lot of time trying to be heard and haven't been taken seriously. So I think you listening, you taking the time to actually hear their story, their experience and take action means so much to these clients.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you have any questions? I think that's us. Like we've done pretty good. We are.
I could talk about these.
I know.
A very long time.
Do you feel like we missed anything?
No, not really.
Does anyone have any questions? One question is what kind of things would you recommend they rule out before you enter kind of into the different food edits or interventions?
I might have touched on it very briefly, but I think particularly ruling out if there's any pathologies like irritable bowel syndrome, IBD, so inflammatory bowel disease, celiac disease, they're the major ones. Functional dyspepsia, all of those functional and other gut conditions would be very important first. Trying to think if there's any others worth ruling out.
No, I think that's
off the top of my head. They're the main ones.
Yeah. And if they do bring up big flags around mental health, anxiety, stress, those types of things, then absolutely just direct engagement to psychology for that. Because as I said, like, yes, you might be able to band-aid fix with reducing symptoms with food in those cases, but it's a collaborative approach alongside behavioral therapy that needs to occur so that it isn't just this band-aid solution of reducing and you actually get to that root cause for them.
Can be really hard, I think, in this space as well for people to be taken seriously around that mental health component. And so often people will get straight sent straight to the dietitian to solve the issues, assuming that food is the cause. So I think it's something we see very common.
Yeah, sometimes you're sending them back to the GP or back to the psychologist as well. Like, I think that's
that
really
advocacy for the client.
Yeah, you do have to be their voice and put, like, I guess, technical terms to that experience because they're already very vulnerable in telling their story. Not everyone wants to do the toilet talk like dietitians are quite comfortable with. And sharing that is a really big thing. Like, I think it's a really important space that we're in, that we can hold space for in our client.
And I think upskilling in the gut health space is, it's great to be able to have some people that you refer on to that are more specialized in that space, but also arming yourself with some professional development around gut health, managing GI conditions, and the supplement side of things. I'll tell an anecdote if I may. I had a client recently where they were experiencing quite significant gut issues, and it was in the aged care space, and their GP had recommended going straight onto they skipped Metamucil, so no flavour, just go into psyllium husk at a really high dosage, and there was no counselling around like a gradual introduction. And so it was so freeing for that client for me to go in and like actually practically work through how to trial it to start with, because I actually walked in and she was trying it with a large dosage, and it was really hard to actually make it into a solution that she could drink. And so I found that a really empowering situation where we could work together and build on what the GP had mentioned. And we were considering other fibre options that might have suited her needs a little bit more than the first conversation she'd had around it.
So good. And that really ties us back to the importance of always going, absolutely clinically, that makes sense, but practically for that person in front of me, how can I make it more enjoyable, easier, and more obvious in their life? And that kind of, taking the time to see, what is enjoyable, what's drinkable, what can you tolerate, and what are we going to put it with and when, is all really, really important in that behaviour sense of going, okay, sure, you might know that a fibre supplement might be a good idea, but how are we going to do that every day? And if they're struggling to get it down, they don't feel confident, it's not enjoyable, it's very unlikely they're going to stick to that change.
Which makes it not effective.
Well, there's no point to your science, is there? Like, you could know all the things around fibre, you could know everything that needs to be known about gut health, but if you can't translate it into how people are going to get into it, then it's going to be really tricky. Oh, someone's requested to join. Do you have a question? I don't know how this works.
I wish we could do questions on there.
I wonder if it'll like. I don't know. Let's see if it works. I'm
trying
all for
something
testing.
new.
Any other questions, guys? The only other one I've seen come through is your thoughts around the hypnotherapy, like Nerva kind of apps for IBS.
I think that I can't be quoted on this because it's not my space, but I do believe that there is a good body of evidence around the efficacy of gut-focused hypnotherapy. Practically, I think that like engagement and I don't know the word I'm looking for, but essentially the interaction with it, I think that it varies person to person. So for some, with some guidance in the mental health space as well, might find that really helpful. However, in practice, I have seen varying levels of engagement with it.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's a really interesting space, and it kind of just taps on like there's multifaceted approaches where it might just it's not one or the other. It can be a combination of things that will elevate the experience of the client in front of us, and some things will stick more than others with different approaches. So I think that's great. Yeah. So having all those tools in your toolbox to recommend or know about is a really key part of gut health. But
definitely.
Yeah, we will flick through this recording soon. But as we said, like the membership that we've got in the Academy is only growing. It's been so fun to have dietitians join us. We're not biased at all. And we've got different options too. We appreciate the financial burden and changes that we all go through. So if it's really that like belonging, community and access to like chat things out, then the starter membership is perfect. It's $10 a month. It's just a matter of jumping in and
Can we
being
call it cheap and cheerful?
It's pretty good. I really enjoy it. But then if you want like access to the group supervision sessions, unlimited group supervision sessions alongside unlimited access to the modules and education side of things, and the pro membership is your jam, And then we've also got supervision membership, which is one-on-one sessions with myself or the other supervisors within our team to chat through whatever you like. Basically, supervision is an opportunity to go, what is taking up space in my life, either personally or professionally right now? What do I need to chat out? It's not an opportunity just for case studies or hand holding. It's an opportunity to elevate and really focus on what means something to me right now and what would I like to, work through with an open, very accepting conversation. So yeah, it can be case studies, but it's definitely not always. A lot of it is career, vulnerable conversations, stakeholder management, lots of things. So,
Especially lately.
yeah. So thank you so much for joining us. It has been so lovely to talk through gut health. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you join me, Kirst, because you're
I love
beautiful.
gut
Oh
health.
my God, like her experience and also her passion in this area is phenomenal. And I just feel really grateful to have you come along. So thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, team.
Thanks for coming, guys.
Yeah, have a great Arvo. Happy Thursday.
Yeah. Bye.